We've got some Dungeons and Dragons to get ready for, or I do. I mean, maybe you do too, but right now we're talking about me. I have a brand new arc of Court of Swords to get ready for, and that's not nothing. It's not nothing. So usually I'll do GM prep prior to the start of a new arc, or if the game takes like a weird turn in a direction I didn't expect. Right now, I get a little of both. I get a little of both because on the one hand, we have this brand new arc starting. We're gonna head over and we're gonna find out what Berg and Ramus have been up to. But at the same time, I also didn't expect to be doing this quite so soon, which means today I'm doing GM prep. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be hanging out with Zeke, and we're going to be making a new character for him. So I have to be ready for the first episode tomorrow afternoon. So there's a lot of stuff between here and there. And as usual, my preference is to do it here, prepare it on stream. So thank you for joining us. Tomorrow is going to be a big Court of Swords day, and it's going to be a little tricky for me. I'm going to have to do a little bit of stuff, leave a little bit of stuff to figure out in the moments before the actual show, because I don't know what Zeke's character is going to be like. We talked a little bit about it during the post show. We talked a bit about how that's going to work. We're going to start with just Ramus and Zeke's new character and JP's new character. And then we're going to bring Berg in on the next episode because Max is on his vacation. So yeah, it's cool. I'm excited. New arcs are always fun and a little intense, and like you kind of have to intro things and remind people of stuff. And this especially is an interesting one because we're taking it back. We're taking it back to the Court of Swords. The show's name will once again refer to the place that the game is set in. So that's going to be good. I want to show you something though. First, I want to show you a very cool fan thing before we get started. So Lady 8 Jane, who's been a RollPlay fan for a while, did something really cool on the community website. Check this out. So Lady 8 Jane said, after watching the Patreon post show and hearing the players talk about the various characters they had and not remembering the arcs, I made a thing. Check this out. Look at this thing. Look. So this is all the characters who have appeared in Court of Swords and what episodes they appeared in. This is on the community website. Yeah, pretty cool. So the data on here, let me read it for you. Some of the data that we can interpolate. I mean, first of all, just looking at it, Kalimat, look at that. I think Kalimat has the longest uninterrupted arc, right? From episode, 50, looks like 50 or 51, all the way out to today. And then, yeah, you can see the shift. This is episode 50 right here, right? Game changed, big game changer. But look at Berg. Berg was around right here, this guy, right there, little gap right there. Like, Berg doesn't have the longest streak necessarily, but certainly the most episodes, seconded only by Ramus Krill. And what's funny, and a thing that I forget sometimes, look, Ramus started in episode 9. Berg started in episode 11, right? Like, they've been around a long time. And just like we said, when Max rolled his stats for Berg, we were like, terrible stats. You will never get to play any other character. This is the character you are going to be doomed to carry around with you for the whole campaign. So the other thing I thought was really cool is in the text, Lady 8 Jane pointed out some things that some of these I knew, not the number, but I already could tell you. So JP has played 11 characters. JP has played 11 characters in this show. Max has played 6. Dan has played 5. Sean, Anne, and Ken all played 2. I'm trying to remember what Anne's other character was. Oh, because Anne was in the 2-shot. That's right. Jeff, Morgan, Aaron, and Zeke have all played 1. So Berg has been on 64 out of 92 episodes. Ramus has been on 51. Kalimat on 42. And then Sully. Sully is the next longest running character. Followed then by Yoji and Azrael, Jubilant Black Gale, Enoch, Gideon, and then when we start to get, look, the most characters, like I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, like six, and I guess 8 is the most. The most characters have been played 8 episodes. But this is so cool. It's so cool. I love it. All the way down to people who lasted 1 episode. Zawaz Wazaz, Ikishnagal, Maj, and Vama. Remember them? Probably not. I mean, Zawaz Wazaz we remember because of how he worked. But like Ikishnagal, Maj, Vama, like I barely remember them. Yeah. So pretty cool, hey? Neat having how that works. Yeah, I love having this stuff. So thank you so much for that, Lady A. Jane. Average character amount of time on screen, 10.6875 episodes. But yeah, you can really visualize the start of kind of the new era, right? So many more like long lines. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So that's, I wanted to share that. I wanted to share that with you so you guys could see kind of what that was like. We're coming up on episode 100, and I feel like 100 episodes is making everybody a little bit like wistful. We're all like, oh, yeah. This show we've been doing for fucking ever. So speaking of doing this show forever, let's talk about what I have planned for the future. So I've been doing this thing lately where I've been making my notes using my iPad and then copying them and putting them into here and then adjusting them with like adding additional docs on top of it. If you're subscribed to the zine level of the Patreon, the last Patreon, all of my notes were abortive Court of Swords notes, basically, that I did on my iPad. So I'm doing these in a note-taking app on the iPad using the Apple Pencil. I'm quite enjoying it. And so this is how I've been taking my little notes. And this is what I've got so far. I wrote these up the other day, right after the last episode, about what I was kind of thinking about for episode 93 plus. Now, I haven't thought about or decided, I guess, what I want the name of the arc to be, right? Because it's kind of about like us as an audience and a group like coming home. It's a little bit about like Imix, right? So this idea of like the embers of Imix, these kind of bits of flame, drifting about the world, right? Igniting the fire. I mean, in a lot of ways, the kind of vibe here for Ramus is kindling the flame, right? Is like reigniting his own soul, and becoming a whole person again. He's a hollow, right? He's basically an undead. Yeah, home, fire, something about hearths. That's what I was thinking too, Ilsunder. Yeah, something like that. Like, yeah, Court of Swords, like Hearthfire or Hearth and Home or something like that. I don't know. I'll keep thinking about it. Right now, I've got it set as Embers of Imix, and I'll think about kind of what we want to do with that. Part of what's important here is sitting down and talking about like this is that tomorrow morning I can share some of these themes with Zeke, and Zeke, because I know him, will want to build a character that will fit into the world, into the themes that I'm building. So if I tell him like this is about displacement, about retrieving that which is yours, rekindling, he'll build a character to fit that. So for me, I want to kind of like plot around themes, and you can see down at the bottom here I've got my like to-do list, right? So I need to create a character for Zeke. I need to create some fronts. I need to overview the themes. I need an inciting events. I'm going to write love letters for all the characters, which if you remember the beginning of the City of Brass arc, I think we did those. We did love letters. If you're familiar with Apocalypse World or Dungeon World, that'll be familiar to you. And I just kind of want to talk to you about where my head is at, and kind of what the situation is. And then you will ask me questions, and in doing so will help get my brain fired up for answering those questions in the setting. So right now, what we're looking at is some indeterminate amount of time, probably like less than a full year, but longer than a month. We pick up after the collapse of the city, right? After we see the collapse of the awakening of Maru Bhavati, the destruction of the greatest city in the world. Maru Bhavati is now dragging himself around the desert like an angry newborn baby, and the players they split, and we we haven't got a scene. We've never talked about what it looks like when they split, that conversation. So maybe we'll flash back to that. But for right now, we get to see Ramus and then Berg eventually, and their new friends and how they've come together and kind of what that's about. So right now we're looking at, like, we did a time skip, plus there's been some regular time and some bits and pieces off. So I imagine that, like, we're looking at X plus 15 years, where X is the very beginning of the show. Yeah, they're only going to remember Kalimat leaving. Yeah, Kalimat went off on his own, right? So anyway, it's been X plus give or take 15 years as they leave. This is 15 years from the beginning of the campaign, and they are returning to the Court of Swords, which has had 15 years to percolate. So here's the situation as I envision it in the Court of Swords right now. So the northern border is basically shut down. Refugees from the river provinces are trying to flee north to the Court of Coins. So the Court of Coins itself has kind of shut down the border and is like, no, we don't want all of your peasant refugees. Like, stay in your own court. The Court of Coins and the Court of Swords are not friends. Things in the Shulin Valley did not go well, and I think that they have this very... They're not like enemies, but they are only friends because the United Nations of Heaven has forced them not to go to war. So they're very, very tense. War, in this case, war between any of the courts is a deep-seated, powerful blasphemy. It goes against the promises humanity made to heaven 10,000 years ago when the courts were formed, right? Court shall never slay court, right? War between them is illegal. Both spiritually and, like, basically they're all under a powerful magical compulsion that if they break it, it's like a Fey pact. If they break it, they, may your milk sour and may your fields go, go sallow, etc. So yeah, heaven has woven into the fabric of reality. They can't go to war, but I mean, they can, but they shouldn't. But they can shut their borders and be like, I'm sorry, peasants, go back to Necrotown. We don't want you. Also, they don't believe that what's happening is true. They don't believe the Court of Coins officially is like, this is a trick. This is a Court of Swords trick, and we do not want to believe them because they're just trying to fuck us over, right? They're paranoid, they're suspicious, and they don't want to let these people in because they think that the Court of Swords is trying to trick them. Right. So the northern border is like massively tightly controlled. There are refugees massing on the borders. The Court of Coins standing army has kind of like come to the border to stand guard. And it's a tense situation. The cities in the Court of Swords are still more or less isolated, I think. I figure there are probably 3 cities, right? One fairly far north, one kind of in like the middle, like western part of the court, and then one down in the south. And the city in the south is probably the capital, and it's the closest one to the bloodshed, right? I guess I could here. Let me kind of show you. Where's my Roll20? Here we go. Let me make a new page, and I'll kind of show you what I'm envisioning for, like, the shape of the court and kind of where this stuff is at. So let's do like an off green background with no grid. Can we do that? Okay. So like when I think about it, you ready for this MS Paint shit? So when I think about how the court is sort of shaped, I imagine the border of the Court of Swords is sort of like kind of like this, right? And then the Court of Coins, its border is like along here and then like up this way, right? Obviously this would overlap and not look like total shit, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And then the Court of Wands, their border would be like that. And then everything else that we're looking at would be like water. This is all water, right? And then, yes, that's right. So there's basically like jungle covering most of the, yeah. And then the Shulin Valley is like a big section right here, right? This is this contested territory. Remember, we have fortresses on either side. This is the kind of like demilitarized zone. And then, yeah, the Court of Cups is like out there somewhere, right? Over here where we don't have map. Yeah, and when I think about, get out of here, gray line. When I think about my kind of cultural, and we've talked about this before, my cultural analogies for what the Court of Swords is in my head. Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, maybe Malaysia in some places, influence of like, maybe like kind of like Korea in some places. Like it's big, and it's that kind of like that chunk of Asia, like India, kind of like as we get further this way, right? So the court itself is probably divided into a bunch of provinces, and the provinces are influenced by the various various other cultures, right? And then, yeah, only 3 big cities. I mean, cities are fairly rare in this world, right? Cities are fairly rare in the world. We've only ever really seen a very few. And I think that's by design. So I imagine if we continue to draw on my terrible, terrible map, I think we have kind of like the northern capital. We have this like port, like a port city, probably somewhere like maybe in that area, right? Yeah, the last time the PCs were in a city, they destroyed one. And then lastly, down here would be like a capital of the river provinces, and then like a port of trade to the sea, right? Because if we imagine it, like the Court of Wands has, and again, I'm not going to make this map any bigger, but the Court of Wands doesn't just stick out here. Like this is a bay, and it probably curves around, right? And there's more court over there. Anyway, this is a terrible, shitty map, but the idea, the reason why I wanted to kind of show you this is because the infestation of necromancer business, right, started in the river provinces, because there is a series of mountains. Let me show you. So there's a series of mountains where the dwarves live, and I think mostly the dwarves kind of live in this like province, or like in this country, and the mountains run up here. And there's probably like a branch, because we talked about the Shulin Valley being like branched into these mountains. So it's set up so there's like, this is where the dwarves live, and there's like roads and stuff, but there's a series of rivers that run kind of down through the court. This is becoming completely fucking unintelligible. And I think probably this province, Jesus, this map is hideous. I'm so sorry. So in this province, there's like the most proliferation of like tiny little rivers and stuff that go like, and there's all this food in this area. And then of course, this is where the Necromancer King is kind of like growing his thing, right? So he's kind of like spread here. And I think this city is probably okay for now, but like this one is getting pushed on, and this one is getting pushed on too. But up here, these guys probably think of themselves as like, oh, we're more civilized, right? We belong, we're so far north. Like those pitiable southerners, they don't know anything. They're peasants, right? But up here, we're civilized. And if any province were to sort of fall to the Court of Cups, like the Court of Coins would love to redraw like that, right? They would love to take this province for themselves. So anyway, I'm just gonna leave this amazing map. I'm gonna put it in the archive so I can find it later. Amazing map of the Court of Swords. The point of all of that shit was just so that I could kind of show you, like what I was thinking in terms of where all this stuff is. So anyway, let's go back to my doc. So there are a couple of cities. I think mostly they're still isolated. The rural areas though are like completely unsafe. Not just because the court army and the Necromancer King are trying to like fight it out, but because even areas north of that, like lower delta, there are brigands and freebooters and mercenaries and adventurers just trying to like pillage the place. they're like, the whole place is falling into chaos. And even if you don't come across the skeletal knights or whatever of the the court of, or of the Necromancer King, there are probably bad people just taking advantage of the chaos, right? Yeah. If the rural areas are unsafe, how does the court get its food? Great question. Very delicately. So they're running out of food, right? And I think that's the thing, is they're fighting for this territory that allows them to continue to feed. But I think the cities are starting to starve, and it's only a matter of time before one of them falls to an undead siege, right? That is a thing that on the fronts for the Necromancer King, that will 100% be one of those options, right? The city in the middle. I need names for these cities, but that will be one of the fronts, is that I think the southern capital will fall under, yeah. And then also, yeah, import, they're paying for imports, because even though the Court of Coins doesn't like them, they're still selling them food. The Court of Wands still also selling them food, but like their main city blew up, so they're kind of like dealing with that. So anyway, the court, because of its traditionally strained relationships, is on its own in this struggle, right? They've been dicks pretty much the whole time since they existed. They think they're better than everybody else. And now they're paying for it. They're paying for their arrogance, because basically the court of Swords was like, no, we are the best court. Obviously, we are the chosen court, and we're the best. Everyone should listen to us. We should get more seats in the like overarching government. Our temples are the best, etc. But now they need help, and all the other courts are like, you guys are kind of dicks, and this feels like it's a trick. So they're getting their comeuppance. You might call it karma, if you like. So they're kind of on their own. And the reason they haven't fallen already is because they have the largest standing army in the world. Their army is the biggest. They have like compulsory army time. They give like great benefits to people who become soldiers. And what's great is that both is why this fight is dragging out for 15 years, and it's why the fight started in the first place. Because if you remember, going all the way back to the very beginning, the origin story of the Necromancer King, is that he was a soldier, and not a big deal either, just like a lower grade, like a foot soldier. And he went out, and he was dealing with some kind of like military situation, right? Like pacifying some mountain tribes, or skirmishing with some dwarves or whatever. And his kingdom, like the Court of Swords, sunk a bunch of time and money and energy into it, and then gave up. They gave up on this fight, and the army like lost a bunch of its people for nothing, because the Court of Swords made peace. And so all these soldiers came back, and they had nothing. They had no money. They had lost this war. The people had turned kind of against them. Maybe there was an edict from the priests who were like, we stopped this war because it was unjust. And so all the soldiers were coming home, and they had nothing, right? Like their land had been claimed, or they lost it, or maybe the Necromancer King, maybe he came back and his family had left him. Maybe his spouse had gotten remarried and stuff, and he came back and he had nothing, right? So he was a pauper. And in his desperation, the Mara were listening, and the Mara said, "Yo, have you ever wanted to be a king?" And he said, "Yeah, fuck yeah, make me a king." And so him and kind of his like former veteran compadres were all blessed by the Mara and given command of their own kind of like army of the dead. And they're fighting a guerrilla war against their own people and their own army, and they know their tactics inside the country. So the Necromancer King is a human. He's a human being, but he has been blessed by the Mara with eternal life and dark power. So his jam is that he's been like raiding and stealing food and poisoning things, and it's spite. It's a war of spite, right? He doesn't want to conquer the Court of Swords. He wants to get revenge for them turning their back on him, right? He gave everything he had to the court and to heaven, and they spat in his face. And the Mara have said, "We will get you your revenge. We will shake the pillars of heaven together." And the Necromancer King was like, "Sick, brah, let's do it." So that's it. Yeah. So the problem here is that normally somebody running around fucking blaspheming like this, if we had been able to catch it early, say by sending some magistrates out there to deal with it, if some magistrates, we could send them and they could fix it and kill him before he became too powerful. So that would have been a great solution to this problem. Unfortunately, the magistrates we sent to fix this problem disappeared. And in the meantime, things have gotten more complicated. Heaven is undergoing some diplomatic reforms. There is a society that is formed among some rebellious Tianxi who think that maybe 10,000 years ago, we fucked up putting all our faith in humans. Like, look at them. They've had 10,000 years to prove themselves, and they fucked it up. So they formed a society called the 14 Divine Reforms, and I need to figure out exactly what those 14 reforms are. But basically, these angels all got together and were like, no, we made a mistake. It's time to undo that mistake. Look what the humans did. They destroyed the most beautiful thing they had, the city. They can't defend themselves. We need to take over, right? We need to put an end to this humanocentric policy situation, and we need to return to the old ways in which the gods rule directly. And so this is what's happening in heaven. And the Empire, right? Anne's soul-sucking character. That's right. Just Another Muffin nailed it. So Anne's character is the handmaiden to this greater angel who is a member of the 14 Divine Reforms. And so that's all happening in heaven right now, which is why the great and powerful Hammer of Heaven is not striking down on the Court of Swords and fixing this problem. Yeah, she's an Empire, an handmaiden, whatever you like. And yeah, Dorian, good catch, right? 14 is an inauspicious number, right? And it's inauspicious on purpose. Like this would be like naming, if you were like an American like revolutionary group that wanted to storm the Senate and change the laws, it would be like naming yourself Abraham Lincoln's Severed Head Society, right? Or like the Burning Constitution Organization, right? It's meant, the 14 Divine Reforms is like, it's a very like inauspicious thing to say. Our idea of what is auspicious, what is august, is a lie and false. They have a bit of that kind of like, this kind of like thumbing their nose at the established order. So that's it. 14 Divine Reform Society. They're trying to put an end to this, like, humans are the best, and they turn the wheel of heaven. We could turn the wheel ourselves. Let's go back to where we were and start it again. We need to rule directly. So they're tying up heaven with all this bureaucratic horse shit, which I think is why Berg, who is a tool of the loyalists, right? The people who believe in the soul of mortals, Berg has become their tool, and they are sending him to fix this problem. They're like, Berg, honey, please go and deal with this problem in the Court of Swords, because the Court of Swords they're a bunch of like arrogant blowhards, but they do indeed have the most ancient and most powerful temple presence in the world, right? They have the most ley lines. The kingdom of the Court of Swords has the best like mana, the best juice for heaven in the whole world. And so whoever controls the Court of Swords on Earth has access to a bunch of kind of like magical stuff, power that can help them win this debate in heaven about what to do with the universe, how best to serve the fountain. In the Court of Swords, the army is still fighting on. Now, in the last 15 years, we talked earlier on about how the Court of Swords especially is very adherent to the old ways. They're very adherent to, like, every family has four leaders. Every village has 4 leaders. Every town, like, everything is built on the sacred object, right? The sacred geometry of 4s. And if someone dies, there is a quest, right? A holy quest to find their reborn essence, right? To drive them. However, the Knight of Swords, I think probably like, I don't know, let's say like 5 or 6 years ago, like long enough that it's like, it's starting to hurt. the Knight of Swords was killed and they haven't replaced them. So the Court of Swords is like, it's like a wagon with 3 wheels. It's gonna go off the road eventually. And they have no, they have no leader to the army, but the army itself attempts to fight on, right? Brave brigadiers, captains, you know, lower level generals are still trying to fight this war, but their lord, their Knight of Swords, is dead and gone. And we cannot, they have not replaced him yet. And so the government, its strength is being sapped. Its martial strength is being sapped, because that's what the Knight of Swords is a stand-in for. Not only like literally leading the army of the Court of Swords, but a tactician, right? The person in charge. And no, it definitely won't be Berg. Berg is definitely not smart enough, but he could be a champion of some sort. Yeah. So the characters could, if they wanted to, seek out that could be something they could do, right? Seek out the Knight of Swords and place them, right? It was the Necromancer King all along, and that's the fear, right? We have this inauspicious void, and people are starting to whisper it's heaven's will that the Mara take over, right? That we are doomed, and this is hell, and maybe this is the way of things. And so there are villagers who, again, like if you're paying any attention to the stuff that I do, all of this is very heavily influenced by my understanding of a very specific conflict or series of conflicts in Southeast Asia and how these things happen in real life. So what we're seeing is there are villages in the river provinces who are like, you know what? Maybe the Viet Cong are the right choice. Maybe, you know, if the Court of Swords is failing us, maybe we should just willingly give ourselves over to the Necromancer King. All praise our new King of Darkness. He brought my grandmother back to life, right? So this idea that that maybe there are people, it's an ideology that is spreading, not just this idea of like conquest. So there are people, human people who are not corrupted by the Mara, who are just like, practically the right thing to do is just throw in with the Necromancer King, right? The Court of Ghosts. There's lots and lots of great options for what we could call like the reign of the Necromancer King. It could very easily be, the Court of Bones, the Court of Ghosts. Maybe his spread covers all the world in darkness, and he starts a new set of courts. We have the Court of Ghosts, the Court of Dust, the Court of the Void, right? We create the 5 dark courts, and this is kind of the Court of Blood, and you kind of like can see again where my inspiration from, if you're familiar with Exalted, this is the end goal of, I always get them mixed up, the Neverborn. The gods, the like big primordials that existed and then were killed and became death, and they're like the patrons of the Abyssal Exalted. But those guys, their idea is they want everything to be dead so that they run they run the world, because all the world is dead and they are the god kings of death. But there are none of those, right? The Mara don't work quite like that. But you know, they just want to push that wagon, that 3-wheeled wagon, right off the cliff. So yeah, I could see in a very long, distant, dark future when the Mara like take over, there would be like they break the world into 5 courts. They would be broken into the Court of the Void at the center with these other like hellish elements around it, and it would be a bad time. But for right now, the Court of Swords is kind of what we want to focus on. So my idea is that the PCs are returning to the court via the Golden Road. The Golden Road is the like main road through creation, basically. It runs from the south in the Court of Swords up through the Court of Coins, and eventually, if you take it, it would lead you to it would have taken you to the City of Brass, but not anymore, unfortunately. So they will be arriving, and I want to show them. The chaos. Like, I want to ask, how do you get in? How do you get into the Court of Swords? Because there's chaos on the border, right? So I imagine we'll likely start the game kind of in the border controlled region between the two. And we'll have that. Now, this is all from me. This is kind of where I'm starting from. I'm gonna have to work out like what the players want for their characters, and I think we can kind of guess at some of that stuff. I'm gonna start with Berg and with Ramus, and then as we introduce JP and Zeke's new characters, I'll refresh and refill. But let's talk a little bit about the overview of the themes and kind of what's happening campaign wise, right? We'll talk about what's left over, like loose threads, things I want to pull at. I'll answer some questions and we can figure out kind of what that's about. So let's talk about themes and characters, like dramatis personae, shit that's still important. So themes, consequence, right? The idea here is that part of this is like consequences on the part of, why is this not a list? Consequence. I hate you, Google Documents. What are you doing? I just want a list, guys. All right, whatever. There we go. Consequences. Right? So the idea of like the Court of Swords hubris coming home to roost. Heaven's choices about humanity. The failure of the original PCs to stop the Necromancer King, etc. Right? Consequence. The things that we have done and how they resonate throughout the world. So the things that you do matter, right? So that's a theme, right? Chaos and not even like chaos, but like war, I guess, is a theme. Or like, not even war's not a theme. War is a thing. War is a backdrop. I want it to be more than conflict, but the idea of like being trapped in a terrible place as it falls apart, right? That idea of the wheel spinning without balance. The three, maybe we just call it the three the three-wheeled wagon. That which is unbalanced, cannot last. The path of decay, entropy, etc. What's that? There's an I Ching, a specific I Ching. Everything falls apart. What's it? Which one is that one? Let me see. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, hexagram 23. That's right. So hexagram 23 is Po, and it's called Split Apart. Yeah, that's right. Disintegration and letting go. It's not the tower. It's about instability. Yeah, right. Path of decay, entropy, unexpected. I guess the idea too is like nothing is a given, right? Anything can change. Right? This idea of, yeah, like if we look at, I guess what would be, and this is an important part, like what is our, obviously the tarot is I'm thinking like death probably, right? Because death is about, well, let's take a look. Let's look at the journey of the arcana. So if we look at the tarot, let me see here. Let's see. I'm thinking death, but it's not about loss in the way that the tower is. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the jam, right? Because let me find a good little, I want something to just like read out. Let's see, tarot, death meaning. Or maybe the Hanged Man. Yeah, I mean, I don't want this to be about endings, right? Yeah, profound change, mortality, failure. Let me look at the Hanged Man. Breaking old patterns, metamorphosis. Yeah. Yeah. Death, I think, like, death is about change, too. Let's use both. So, like, death, the Hanged Man, right? This idea of like change and metamorphosis. Change and metamorphosis. And it's like this is being resisted, right? The Mara hate anything to do with the tarot. So they are trying to turn the world away from the positive aspects of death and the hangman towards like decay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. And I think I'm going to make this an in-universe thing. This three-wheeled wagon. Like it's a like a story in the court of swords. Let's see. The three-wheeled wagon is a parable about the stability of the courts, about family, and about how even one broken piece can ruin the whole. Teaching us to care for our own, to love our neighbor, and ultimately to conform as a means to protecting culture, etc. Right? So you don't want to be a three-wheeled wagon, which means sometimes you have to stop where you're going, stop what you're doing, and like, yeah, it's a fable, a parable to teach children, but also adults, reminding them of the three-wheeled wagon. Like, don't be that. If something, and then if we go back, like the consequences here, not to put too fine a fucking point on it, but like the court itself is a three-wheeled wagon because it sowed the seeds of its current trouble by ignoring and abusing the other courts and abandoning its own. Its veterans after the conflict that ultimately spawned the Necromancer King, right? So the court itself is a three-wheeled wagon. They caused their own problems, or did they? Right? Like this is the question to sort of ask is like, is it enough that they were a jerk and that like who's responsible for this? Right? If the court was nicer to its soldiers, if the court was nicer to the other courts, would it be in this situation? Is the responsibility of the other courts to protect it? Is the Court of Swords the broken wagon, or is it the wagon with three wheels? Right? This is the thing about parables, is that if you look at them the right way, they can tell whatever fucking story you want. So this is how, so let's do that. So, or is it? Because like who is responsible for what? What do we owe each other? Right? That's the philosophical question. Is like, what do we, and I guess maybe obligation, right? Obligation and duty. So there you go. Yeah. What was the war? So we didn't really, the Necromancer King didn't come home from a war. It was like police action, against some kind of like, I want it to be against like someone indigenous to a region that the Court of Swords wanted. We need like a people that they went to war with, and then it became not profitable anymore. And I wonder if there isn't anything like good that I can think of off the top of my head that I want to see. So like, okay, in the Court of Swords, so let's see here. So the Court of Swords, like I guess I don't need to make notes about this, but in the Court of Swords, the primary the people that live there are predominantly humans and then dwarves. So probably like 80% humans, 10% dwarves, and then the other 10% is split up between Genasi, then maybe Tianxi, then a tiny fraction of half-elves and elephant people. I wonder what elephant is in Thai? What's the word for elephant? No, I need a translator. Translate. It's going to be a word I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Elephant in Thai. Let's see. I don't know how to pronounce this. It looks like it's Chang, but I don't think that's it's that. Let's see. So that's there you go. That's what that'd be how it was spelled. I don't know how it's pronounced. Let me see what it is in Vietnamese. Convoy or voit. Yeah, elephant. Huh. Okay. Well, I'll figure out a cool like adaptation for that. Chuckles. So anyway, they're sacred. Oh, it is. Oh, okay. Cool. In Khmer, it's Damri. Yeah, I love it. Anyway, so there's those. And these guys we'll see now because maybe they're waking up. Maybe it's time for them to like leave their monasteries and make a decision. Maybe the Ents have gone to war, right? Because we know elephants are a sacred people in the court. So anyway, these are kind of our themes for right now. This idea of sowing, I guess this is the other one, right? Like in addition to obligation duty, like reaping what you sow. And it goes in with consequence. It kind of fits with this other stuff, this idea that like, if you did what you did and the time has come to pay the piper, how do you get through that? And this reverberates in terms of the court. It reverberates in terms of the characters. It reverberates in terms of the heaven, right? Of heaven making this decision about humans, and now maybe their 10,000-year-old seeds are coming to fruition, and maybe it's an ill fruit, right? So reaping what you sow, and that's these are kind of our themes. So let's talk about what's actually in the, like, what's going on, like stuff, like dramatis, not personae, but like objectia, right? Like the things we need for our little drama. I don't know what the Latin term for like objects of drama, but objectum. But like what stuff do we have in this arc? What kinds of things are present? So obviously we have like the court and its workings, right? So like the cities, roads, armies, people, and day-to-day machinery of a kingdom under siege from within, right? A stubborn people trying to survive, etc., right? So this idea that we have the court itself and all the stuff attaches to it. So the governments, cities, roads, people, all of that stuff. That is a part of our kind of story background. So we also have we have heaven, right? Heaven's bureaucracy and its representation in the world. The network of ancient and sacred temples, the priests and monks who serve there, the gods of the gods of the land and rivers, and then heaven itself, right? And those in it with an interest in the Court of Swords, right? So they're kind of a major player as well. So heaven looking down and seeing this happening and seeing this kind of breadbasket of mana, of prayer energy, and kind of figuring out what that looks like. So we have heaven, we have the court, we have the Embers of Imix, right? So the Embers of Imix, the various servants of the Flame Lord, like most ancient power, Imix. He who is flame, Imix himself, let me take a minute about Imix. Imix is, I would be hard pressed to think of a more powerful primordial, except for maybe like the Earth, like the world itself as like Gaia form, like Mother Earth kind of jam, right? Like Imix is fire. Fire is kind of a big deal. Imix is, yeah, the sky, right? The sky is also pretty important, but like Imix is fire. All fire is Imix. He's a big fucking deal. There's the sea, the land, and there is fire. The reason fire is important is because if you look at, like, Imix matters because he's Prometheus, right? Without Imix, we have no fire, we have no light, we have no heat, we are animals. Without Imix, we have no stars, we have no sun. Without Imix, we have no, like, he's the spark, he's divine creation, right? He's all that shit. And he's very important to humans because of what fire represents. Now, remember, Almara, air in this universe, and air in a lot of like sort of pre-science, like air isn't oxygen. We don't breathe air. Air is like the blowing of the wind, right? Air moves boats. Air tousles our hair. Air blows. Air doesn't just sit around, right? None of that. Like, we don't think like, oh, if we didn't have air, we'd all suffocate. That's not air. Air in this case is like wind and motion and momentum. Just like fire isn't just fire. The other thing about Imix is Agni and Novum, I think was what we called his son. The actual children of Imix they're not, obviously not literal children. They're not like Imix is your dad and this is your mom. It's a way for humans to symbolically interpret facets of Imix. So Agni is Imix, and Imix is Agni, and Novum is both Agni and Imix. They're all fire. All fire is Imix. Every flame, every god of fire, many like I think the serpents of flame, right? Like fire dragons. Because remember, in this world, dragons are organized by element, right? Thunder, fire, Captain Planet, but like those kinds of things. So there's a subset of dragons that serve Imix, or did. But by that token, because he is so big and so spread out, Imix he's not like, even not like Maru Bhavati, right? Like Maru Bhavati is a contained object with boundaries, right? You could tell where Maru begins and ends. You can tell where the world is and where Maru Bhavati is. You could tell where the Night Serpent is or isn't, right? You could say, here is her nose, here is her tail, and she is great. However, with Imix is everywhere. Imix is all fire. And so those who serve him they're like druids for the most part, but also probably there are warlocks of Imix. There are definitely clerics of the Forge. There are light clerics that serve the fire, but they're not praying to a thing, right? Like Imix isn't sitting up in heaven or like hanging out in a volcano and it's like, yes, you can have spells. They're tapping into the idea of fire. And fire is intrinsically and when I say human, I don't mean physically humans. I mean the chain of entities that a human soul can occupy, right? So when I say humans, I'm speaking from heaven's perspective, meaning half-orcs and genasi and whatever. They all contain within them, to some degree or another, this like touch of Imix flame. And probably there's a myth somewhere about how Imix is responsible for souls being souls, right? Like Imix snapped his finger and souls alit with divine essence. Before that, humans were just like apes, basically. So yeah, Imix, he's a bunch of stuff. And one aspect of him is Agni. Novum is another. And yeah, so I don't think we will ever meet Imix in that we've already met him. This isn't going to result in a like, welcome to the castle of Imix. Here is the Fire Lord and his major domo, and you've arrived too soon. It'll just be like, Imix is everywhere that there is fire. Imix is the fire within you, right? That feeling of passion. I mean, shit, like, he is one of the, I guess if we want to tie it back to the old school, like, elements of the alignment in the game, Imix is anyone who is born under a fire sign is touched by Imix, which I guess means that there are other entities. The other Imix's like siblings are the earth itself, the water of the sea, the air of the sky, and the void, right? The dark dragon, this great shadow that exists and is like ultimately kind of hidden, right? This thing we don't talk about. And the only thing that we've ever seen kind of attached to that is the nameless sibling, right? The nameless sibling was a Voidborn, and had some power from there. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what happened to Imix that caused him to disappear? I don't know. He's sleeping. Like, as with all the primordials, so there was a deal that was made way back ago, like 10,000 years ago. There was a deal that was made in which some gods were like, hey, we're going to make heaven because we have seen the future, and it is humans. It is this chain of reincarnation, and our job, our divine purpose as ordained by the pure light of the fountain is to follow human souls, to polish them up, and to reunite them with the universe, so that eventually we may all join heaven, we may all join the fountain in its light, and everything is perfect, and nirvana is achieved for the whole universe, right? So that happened a long time ago, and there were a bunch of gods, like the Marubavati and the Night Serpent, and like kind of this is our sort of like, they said no, basically, these gods. These are the ones we call the primordials, the gods of the gods of the earth. They said like, no, this is dumb. We hate this. Screw you. We're staying here. All the other gods built heaven around the fountain, and they live up there in their magic realm. And over time, all the primordials kind of fell asleep, right? They slumbered away because they became like the inert earth, right? There is a power like Imix that represents the earth itself, but she is sleeping, and we all live upon her body, basically. So she is, again, both the literal earth itself and all the figurative representations of earth, in the same way that Imix is literally all of the fire in the universe, but also the divine manifestation of the philosophical concept of fire. Yeah. So that's kind of the idea. They were like, no, we're good. We're gonna sleep, and slowly, like, our consciousness will fade. The universe became too complicated for us, and we shattered. We broke into these assets, these tiny pieces, right? And so Imix lives within every human soul to some degree, right? There's that Hephaestus Vulcan, like, he breathed life into the mortal soul, but also, like, if you look into a flame, you gaze upon the body of Imix. Yeah. So that's kind of the thing. But people don't worship these things because people are selfish and they want things to be about themselves. This is why, like, heaven's whole philosophy was such an easy sell to humans, because heaven said to these early humans, hey, so we've been thinking, you're the best thing in the universe, and we now exist only to serve you. So all you have to do is pray to the Arcana, follow, these steps through your lives, and we will take care of you and protect you, and we will make the universe just for you with this sole purpose of your enlightenment, your perfection, right? And humans were like, fuck yeah, dude. And that's how it went. But the primordials, they have nothing to offer directly, right? Like, I think that there is an unpredictability to drawing your power from a primordial source, which leaves Ramus's future kind of in the lurch. So that massive digression is just to talk a little bit about Imix, and that's kind of like the thing, right? I wanted to take a minute, and I wanted to kind of just talk about where I see Imix and kind of how Imix works. Now remember, Mixsplit, when I say humans, I don't mean humans. I mean the player character races, right? I mean people who have souls. So in a way, heaven serves what I call the human soul, but it's really like mortals. Yeah, right? Yeah. There's a difference. Basically, the universe divides between two kinds of entities. Entities that have souls and entities that are souls, right? Entities that are in the world and entities that are of the world. If you are of the world, you cannot become one with the fountain until all those that are in the world have become of it, if that makes sense, right? So like eventually, when all of those human souls have been reunited with the fountain will spilleth over and consume all those that, and return all of those that are part of it. Because Imix and heaven and every god and every entity that is of the world but not in the world will reunite with it once all the humans are perfected. That's the idea, right? The light of the fountain will be so overwhelming that it will return us all to a state of oneness with each other in the universe, and we will all become part of the fountain's holy light. That's nirvana. That's the end goal of heaven, right? Because they see the universe as this ultimately flawed place that that is broken up and corrupted, right? The world is a corrupted facet of what it once was, which was pure white light, right? We want to unfuck that, deprism things. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm seeing as like Imix's thing and like what it's about. So Imix, Heaven's bureaucracy, the court itself, obviously the Necromancer King, right? Necromancer King and his armies. Though he needs a better name internally. He's not the Necromancer King to the people who are loyal to him. Basically, their philosophy is like, heaven has lied to us. Right? They have lied to us through the courts. The courts are not divinely mandated. They are our enemy. They do not care about us. They are only their own friends. We have to take what is ours, right? They see him as a sort of Robin Hood figure. There are those people who are like, wait a second, this guy is he's pretty cool. They don't think of him as like, they've overcome the idea of the Mara being like a corrupting force, and they see them in their facet of like a liberating lie, right? This idea that, I mean, maybe it's a lie. Like, yeah, they use necromancy, but like, what is life and death except another lie that heaven tells us? What good is the body without a soul? You know? So yeah, we'll figure out something. That Necromancer King is just what I've been calling him. I don't think anyone on Earth calls him that. I think he just needs a better name. That's not really his name. But he's like a hero, right? He's a hero to some people who knows the truth, and he's willing to tell it. And he's almost like an anti-religious figure in the sense that he has a religion of a religion. He has this like, heaven is a lie, the gods are false, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Necromancer King is just like a thing that's been sort of floating around. Yeah, so that's kind of the thing. He's an apostate. Yeah, where he's like, no, listen, we can do better than this. We don't need heaven. We don't need that. Like, I have control over life and death, right? Death is meaningless to me. I have died 1,000 times. I have seen the truth of death, and it is not darkness, right? So I feel like I gotta go with his undeath. Like, it has to not be like gross, dripping, seeping wound kind of like undead. Like maybe in battle, like if he raises the like mangled dead, but he has to be tempting. There has to be some kind of like dark like promise here. He can't just be like gross, dripping, zombies. I'm thinking of him as like, what are the 10 who were taken? Have you read what is it called? The got that book, of the fantasy book about the mercenaries. What the hell is that book called? Black Company. He's like one of the, yeah, he's like one of those guys. And he's just like powerful and seductive, and he grants like gifts to those who are loyal to him. Yeah. Like the people that serve him feed well, though sometimes they feed on human flesh, right? He counts among his ranks ghouls and vampires, but they're vital and alive in a way that maybe they weren't when they were humans. So yeah, he has this sort of like promise to him of like, if you join me, we can turn our backs on heaven together. Join me, right? And we will topple this false heaven that has lured us in with its promises, right? So he's a powerful figure. He's had 15 years to build up his power. He's like a super badass lich, and yeah, he is like. And the part of it, I think, too, is that despite being a super powerful weirdo lich, he's like a hero of the people, right? Because he was nobody, right? He was a soldier who his like those bastards in the capital turned their back on him, just like they turned their back on us, right? They send their magistrates to steal from us. They send their magistrates to take. We give them, 2/3 of our food in exchange for what, right? What do we get? Yeah, the adversary, right? That's definitely like kind of a deal for him. And he is one of us, risen from our ranks, given power over life and death to make good on what was promised to him. Yeah. So there's the Necromancer King, right? That's his whole jam. And he is here to lead us to a new age in which death has no hold over humanity. We need not suffer to become perfect. We are perfect already, right? Why does heaven strip us of our bodies, of our memories, of our power, except to keep us in the dark, right? The cycle of reincarnation is a cycle of having our memories wiped from us. Why can we not live forever now, today? So there's the thing, right? And this is the Mara like whispering in his ear, like, hey, so it's gonna be good. Just fuck heaven, right? They suck. Yeah. So that's the deal, right? Do not let heaven take from you what is yours. Say no to death. Turn your back on death. And I think that he has some access to like a time before death was real, right? Like there was definitely a time where death just like wasn't really a thing in the universe. And it was created, and maybe he blames heaven for inventing death to like fix their mistakes, right? Yeah. So he's a little bit inspired by like, obviously a bunch of the stuff you can already see. He's a little bit of like a weird evil Buddha, but also like the first season of Westworld and kind of like the awakening of the park servants. If you imagine the hosts are humans and the guests are like God, right? The gods walking around kind of like enjoying the world. Yeah, he wants to go back to this time before heaven invented suffering for us. And then also he has this promise. He has this promise of like, do not worry. Those you kill, I will return to your side. They will understand. They will see the dark flame of my light. This idea of like convincing people to turn on their brothers and sisters who live like in the village over, or like, take knives and go in the night and murder those soldiers who are sleeping in the barracks across the river. Because if you do, only in killing them can I show them the way. They will rise. When the sun's light falls behind the mountains, they will rise from their beds, given new life, and they will join our cause. This idea of them they're this big weird death cult, but like not in the traditional sort of drippy, smelly death cult. Yeah. More like death is you only have to die one more time. That's kind of the thing, right? That's his promise. Die only once under my service and then never again. Heaven would have you die 1,000 times to prove yourself. I ask you for but one death, right? So yeah, he's a mess, and he's out there murdering people and poisoning villages and Yeah, that's right. So yeah, he's a nasty dude. But like, I don't know, maybe he's right. Who knows? But that's his promise. Yeah, you must only die one last time. Let this, and that's like a sacred ritual, right? Like the final death. And after this, you will never die again. I promise. So I cannot wait until him and Ramus meet. Oh man. Because he's going to just be like, you come before me a man perfect, a man perfected already. Heaven is forcing your body to collapse, right? Heaven is crumbling you. Heaven is breaking you down. I can save you, brother. You do not need a soul, right? You only think that you do. You are coming apart at the seams because you are bound to heaven's will. Let me sever that connection, right? Exult in your soullessness, Ramus. So I really hope they get to have that conversation, right? So we'll see, right? So these are kind of like the main objects that I see in the kind of like in the coming arc. This idea of like the temptation, but also the darkness, right? Let me make a couple of quick notes here so I remember and I can look. The tempting darkness, the promise of only one more death and then eternal life, free of suffering, a return to a time before humanity died over and over to serve heaven, a truth bringer, a killer of men, a dark flame igniting the Riverlands. Okay. So that's kind of the thing. He's our big, like, he's causing the problems, but he's also saving them. And so this would be a big moment of choice, right? Like Ramus is a 3-wheeled wagon, right? He is a body with no soul. He is that 3-wheeled wagon, the unbalanced thing that cannot last. So he's falling apart. So give me one. Heaven asks you for 1,000,000 deaths. I ask only for one. And that's the promise, that he gives. So, okay. So these are our objects of drama. These are the sort of things that are going on, in the world. So like, what do the PCs want? Or I guess, what does everybody want? Because that's the most important question you can ask as a game master, right? Because in a role-playing game, the things that are fun to do and to watch come from desires intersecting and hard choices as a result, right? What do I want? What do you want? Are we in opposition to each other? How do we get out of that? How do I get what I want and you don't get what you want? Or like, how do we end up in that situation? So right now we can talk about Ramus wants, right? We can talk about Berg wants, JP character name here. Yep. Name here. And then Zeke character name here. Right. So I'll come back and fill these in. And then for NPCs, we've got like the Necromancer King. We've got the Embers of Imix, representing like kind of the people who are functioning as Imix's like servants and interpreters of the will of the flame or whatever, this weird fire cult that exists. They want the court government wants the court army, right? Do we have any other NPCs that we care about right now? Because there's like some loose threads that I don't care about. I guess the other thing is like we can just cut those off, right? Oh yeah, Heaven, of course. Yeah. Heaven wants. Good call. Okay, so let's see, loose ends to cut off for now, right? Things I don't care about. So these things are like the Farang. Don't care about them. Not important right now. The Shulin Valley. It's sort of like might be totally fucked. Basically what happens, you can all wait for this moment. Wait for this moment. If Ramus goes to the Embers of Imix, give them, yeah, that's a good point. I'll put the mark here. Gives them that gives them the token, right, that Agni gave them, and says, hey, Imix, one of your aspects, right, your son Novum is trapped by the gnomes in the Shulin Valley. The priest of Imix or whatever will take the stone and be like, thank you, Ramus. And then off screen, all of the gnomes will die horribly in a fire. A terrible, terrible fire will burn through the Shulin Valley and just fuck everything up. The Shulin Valley will get hit by a fucking meteor from space, and it will just burst into horrible flame. Now, it doesn't mean they're all gonna die. It just means the valley is toast, and King Persnigitron, his kingdom is destroyed by fire and terror. The gnomes will scatter. Probably King Persnigitron will, like, you know, run away. But someday, you know, he might come back. But basically, if the servants of Imix find out about the Shulin Valley, it's toast, right? Shulin Valley and the kingdom of the forest gnomes. Not on screen. I also don't care about the Night Serpent right now. I don't care about I don't care about Maru Bhavati, right? Don't really care about the cult. I'm gonna call this like the Immortal Cult or Immortals Cult. You know who I'm talking about, right? Like we already had the Immortals. Basically, the cult of that guy. I'm gonna just put it this way: the cult of that guy nobody can remember. There we go. I don't care about them. What are other loose ends we just don't care about? Just to make sure that we don't have to, like, that, you know, that I'm not interested in their stuff. I think this is probably it for right now. Yeah, right. Nega Berg. That's right. Yeah. So like Nega Berg and Mod, the orcs of the desert orcs, right? Who maybe worship Demon Berg now? Yeah, so these are all things that are sort of not important just this second. So I don't want to include them. I don't care about them. We're not going to come back to that stuff. I should say Heaven we should break down into the loyalists want, and what do we call them? The 14 something or other red dogs. 14 divine reforms. The 14 Divine Reforms Society wants. Okay, great. There we go. Oh yeah, we also don't care right now about Kalimat's weird parasite baby, who is like 2 years old. Yeah, like thing. Yeah, Kalimat impregnated oh yeah, the bell. So people were asking me about the bell. So the Bell of Dark Voices, unless this won't come up now, but the Bell of Dark Voices, the reason I write these is that these are things for future episodes. I'm not saying we'll never talk about these, but I'm just saying this is all the stuff that we will put out there for later. So later, if I want to come back to this stuff, these are all options for campaigns, right? So the Bell of Dark Voices, people asking me about this. Someone on the Q&A thread said, what happened to the Bell of Dark Voices? It was inside Kali. So one of two things happened. One of two things. Either Big King Tauti was so powerful that he evaporated the bell and it disappeared, right? It was destroyed when Kalimat became like Egg Boy. Or Big King Tauti just kind of like blended it in with all the other Kalimat stuff, and Kalimat will become a great dragon of thunder and death, and eventually will become like the dark resounding voice that echoes death. Like, he's going to be like a giant, terrifying herald of doom, right? It could be possible that Kalimat will grow up to sing the song that ends the world, right? That dragon has like a necro thunder attack that he sounds from the top of Mount Wudan. Yeah, he's this like thunder dragon of doom, right? The dark serpent that will sing the song that ends the world. So not really a thing now, but like maybe a part of Kalimat / the trumpet of darkness that will resound the note that ends the world, like crazy apocalypse dragon thing. And it's the Bell of Dark Voices, like I told you, right? Right, exactly. The terrible song of death that rains down from Mount Wu-Tang. Yeah, and there is some stuff about like maybe Kalimat and the Night Serpent hook up and become king and queen of the demonic hell rubble that once was heaven. I don't know. We'll deal with that later. Right? Like, Kalimat could grow up to become this like great and terrifying like dark god serpent thing, and then the Night Serpent is like, hey baby, what's up, I love you, and he's like, I've always loved you, and now we are equals. And then they, I don't know, have babies and they destroy the universe. But you know what, don't worry about it. Kalimat can be the last boss of episode 150 or some shit. But yeah, necro thunder dragon, not today. Not an important part of your balanced Court of Swords breakfast.